Joe, and I'm here with Blake. We're off to do Camaro things. I've got well, I'll just back up for a moment and say, so when I dropped the car off with Blake, we had that issue mostly with the ECU getting hot, and we had some throttle related issues. You know, we tried replacing the throttle body as a Hail Mary to try and make it to the half-mile race. That did not happen. Since then, Blake's really taken some time and gone through a ton of stuff, and we found the oil pressure, or sorry, the fuel pressure sender was the wrong one, which I don't know. I don't know how that happened. It probably just honest mistake by say if he had everything apart, putting them back together. Maybe he moved shops at the time. I don't know. No big deal there. And we replaced that one. And I mean, you've gone through like all the sensors and all the things, right?
Yeah. So I took the harness out, disconnected everything off of the 5-volt rail on the harness, checked the harness for any continuity between the 5-volt rail and grounds. That was one of the suggestions from Altec, was to check and see if 5-volt was getting shorted somewhere. The harness tests good, no obvious problems there. Like I said, we replaced the throttle body. I took all of the 5-volt transducers. So basically the 5-volt rail in the car has the drive-by-wire throttle body, the throttle pedal, and then your 5-volt pressure transducers for manifold absolute pressure, oil pressure, and fuel pressure are on that. And that's basically what's on the 5-volt rail in the car. So I took all those out. Like I said, that's how we found, when I looked at the computer, it said you had 150 PSI of fuel pressure, which I don't think was right. That's how we figured out that transducer had gotten swapped to a 50 PSI instead of a 150. So we put a low dollar 150 back in there. I took the harness apart, checked all the pins, did electronics cleaner on them. And then I took the other transducers out. So it's got twin transducers for manifold pressure, one for the boost gauge, one for the ECU, and then the same for oil, one for the gauge, one for the ECU. I took all those out, took all the connectors apart, cleaned all the pins. One of the pins looked a little off, so I replaced that pin, cleaned all the sensors out, cleaned all the lines out, just made sure everything was in perfect condition, put it back together. All the sensors are working great, no apparent problems there. Also regrounded the ECU, just to add. It was grounded well before, we didn't have problems with it, but more grounds never hurt anybody. So we added another ground to it as well. All that stuff done. And we still see the same issue with the ECU. Basically, when you turn the car on and let it sit, over time the temperature slowly climbs of the ECU itself, while the outside of the case is cool. So it's not something, we'd thought at one point that maybe it was just getting hot in the engine bay. With the hood open, like you can put your hand on the ECU, it's barely above ambient. But the internals of it are getting hot.
Yeah, so for those of you who may just be randomly chiming in and not knowing the pain and the butt-isms that go with a car, when you have issues like this is the level of detail. Problems like this honestly need to be sorted out. A lot of people just don't have the patience, like, well, screw this, time to sell the car, move on, whatever, and you know, more power to you. But stubborn, foolish people with money, you know, like to get things fixed, and this is literally the level you got to take stuff. And Blake is meticulous on all this stuff, and I thank him profusely pretty much every time I see him for the level of detail he goes into it. So we've checked all the obvious things and level of priority down to where right now we're hoping it's the ECU. So Blake has been gracious enough, and I know Blake's wife won't watch this, but shout out to her anyway. She had given up her parking spot in Blake's garage for me to park the Camaro, and that time has come for me to get the Camaro, because we're just going to be waiting. We're going to be waiting for Haltech at this point to ship the ECU out, maybe have them look at it. We got to get with them and just take the steps. So I don't want to take up his space or, you know, try the patience any more than I probably have already pushed it with garage space. So I'm going to be taking the Camaro from Blake's back to my house, even though it's still broken. So it'll be limping, and it'll probably give me issues on the way home. And then we're going to be basically getting in touch with Haltech and seeing if we can't ship the ECU out or what we need to do to troubleshoot further. Hopefully, I'm actually hopeful that the ECU is the issue, and perhaps, you know, Haltech can either repair mine or, I mean, I'm at the point with the car, if I have to buy a new ECU, even though that's expensive, I will do that just to get the dang thing running right again. But I just want to get it fixed. Hopefully it's something as simple, it's a one-stop thing, and I can just get an ECU or have my ECU fixed and good to go. If not, we open a whole other can of worms that I don't want to go to, nor do I ever want to burden Blake with on this scale.
Blake agrees. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Okay. Sorry, I don't know what happened to that. Hopefully, that other file. Anyway, what I was trying to say is that he went through a painstaking. He built that harness by hand. I don't want to think about how many countless hours he had in that building the harness by hand, but he did that, and it was probably the single most painful, long thing we did on the car to get it where it is. So
yeah, it's building a harness like that it's about 20 hours of Microsoft Excel, which is good news. Is if we have to redo stuff, that hasn't changed. But it's about 20 hours in Microsoft Excel painstakingly mapping out where every wire goes, and then it's about 30 to 40 hours of building it on the car, and that's for what your car has, what I would call a club sport harness.
Okay.
It has like a not quite a full mil spec crazy, but a high-end TXL wiring harness, and it's about 40 hours of labor on the car, physically wiring it and terminating it. So
yeah. So long story short, let's hope for not that. Not that would be much preferable. God, I don't want to ask you to do that. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. You said there was something else you may want to try?
Yeah, so I was talking to another friend that does a lot of motorsport stuff this morning at a car meet, and he suggested the one thing we haven't done, we've checked ECU temperature with the car running. What we haven't done is basically put an ignition on and just let it sit ignition on without the car running, and then log what that ECU temperature does. So that would be basically what that would eliminate. The one thing that has occurred to me is if for some reason the circuits, there's what's called an H-bridge in the ECU, that's what runs the drive-by-wire throttle body. That's the only high amp circuit in that ECU, right? That's the only thing that has major amp draw. Everything else is just like a ground switch. It won't move the throttle around without the car running. It also will lower other things, just won't happen without the car running. So if we do that and it still gets hot, that would be even more of an indicator to me that there's an ECU problem.
Okay.
It doesn't guarantee it one way or another, but it's a useful piece of data. So it's something else we're gonna try, and it'll only take, like, we can plug it in, it'll take like 6 or 7 minutes, because that temperature comes up quick. So
hey, I'm all about trying it. If there's a way to more pinpoint what this is, I'm all about it. So so anyway, we'll fast forward to Blake's house and we'll give that a shot.
yeah, it's funny. Some of the guys discussing this style of issue were like, oh well, what if, if you have your wideband running off of it, et cetera, that could cause it. And I'm like, oh, let me check that. And I'm like, oh no, I thought of all that. I did all these things already. Yeah. I already addressed all of this when I built the harness so that this wouldn't be a problem.
So a lot of the things I love about this car and this setup is you engineered a lot of this stuff, making it very easy to work on and maintain, which has been ingenious and very helpful when it has come time to do stuff like this.
Well, that's the rule when you're designing stuff right, is make it easier on the next guy, because probably the next guy is going to be you. So try not to screw over future you. So take a little more time when you're engineering things, and then you have a little less trouble.
Yeah.
So I talked about before, we added a ground. Mm-hmm. So this is the factory ground where the GM ECU was. So what I added is this massively overkill 4-gauge. That's awesome. Runs down to the engine block. Perfect. And is there on the alternator. And then the engine block has 2 of those, has one on each side. Nice. And then this was cleaned up. Yeah. We've got really good grounds. Perfect. Well, one less thing we have to concern ourselves with. So basically, you want me to key on ignition only. Correct. And we're going to look for a rise in ECU temperatures. We're going to monitor ECU temperatures. Yep. All right. Are the keys in it? Yeah, it should be in the center console. Perfect. I just rolled down the window because I don't want to ever lock myself out of the car. Good choice. Good choice. You let me know whenever you're ready, buddy. Yep, give me just a second. Okay. All right, ready when you are. Okay. Here comes ignition. Okay. And now we wait. and it's climbing at about the same rate that it does with the car running.
Okay.
So we're gonna give this a minute or two here and see if it gets up above 100 plus.
So end result was what temperature?
114
114
Fahrenheit.
So not anything crazy hot, but as I was telling Blake, this thing has been inconsistent too. You know, when I took it for a drive for a while there, I drove for a couple hours in stop and go traffic, and it ran fine until it didn't. And that was, I don't know, 5 or 6 on-off stops. So again, I don't know. It's troubleshooting, but with the inconsistency, it doesn't help. So it still gives us more data we can give to Haltech and see if we can't press forward further with it. Yeah, so here comes the fun part. Getting to limp the broke Camaro, you know, back to my place. Good times, good times. Well, so far I've managed to make it 5 minutes away from Blake's house, and it's running like it has a slight miss. It's just not running smooth. And pulling into the gas station because I was going to top it off with the 85. That same 5 minutes away, it died going to the pump. So I've got that going for me so far. We'll see if she starts. If everything goes right, I've still got about a 30-minute drive home. Clearly not running correctly. Yeah, that's loading up. It's not one to idle at all. Great. Good times. Well, a little more than halfway home, and so far so good. It's pulling a little bit to the left, but I'm just gonna be chalked up to having checked my tire pressure in a hot minute. So, you know, there's always that. But other than that, I mean, so far so good. It's inconsistent. It was running like crap getting out of Blake's. It felt like I had a miss and died going into the gas station. Then you guys all saw the rough start. I don't know. At this point, it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's obviously something going on that's causing it, and we don't really know what. So we'll see if we can't make it home and go from there. Well, it died on me one more time on the way home, but I made it home okay, so thank goodness. Now to pull that guy and see if we can't send it off to Haltech to figure out what's going on.